Morning, everybody. I'm David Vitter of Louisiana, and I'm here representing all of the Republican members of the EPW committee. This morning, as you know, we chose not to attend the scheduled markup of Gina McCarthy to be the new administrator of the EPA. And we sent Chairman Boxer a letter clearly outlining why. And I just want to read that because I think that's the clearest explanation of where we're coming from. Dear Madam Chairman, as you know, all Republicans on our EPW committee have asked EPA to honor 5 very reasonable and basic requests in conjunction with the nomination of Gina McCarthy, which focus on openness and transparency. While you have allowed EPA adequate time to fully respond before any markup on the nomination, EPA has stonewalled on 4 of the 5 categories. Because of this, no Republican member of the committee will attend today's markup if it is held. We do not ask or expect that you will agree with this decision. We do ask and expect that you will follow the rules of the committee and the full U.S. Senate. Rule 2A of the committee rules requires that at least 2 members of the minority party be present to constitute a quorum, which is necessary for the committee to take action. Rule 26-7A1 of the Senate rules requires that a majority of any committee be physically present to take action. This is a requirement enforceable on the Senate floor, a fact confirmed by the Senate Parliamentarian's Office. In addition, there is clear committee precedent regarding this. In 2003, Democratic members of the EPW committee chose not to attend the scheduled markup of Michael Leavitt as President Bush's nominee to head the EPA, pending the EPA's responding more fully to their requests. Then Chairman Inhofe followed the rules cited above and scheduled an official markup for 2 weeks later. We ask and expect that you do the same. We also ask that you read this letter at any committee meeting held today and place it in the record. Thank you for your leadership of the committee. Again, I think that very clearly lays out the position of all Republican members of the EPW committee. And I really just want to underscore 3 points. First of all, as the letter clearly states, this is about our key 5 openness and transparency requests. And everyone, Gina McCarthy, the EPA, the Democratic members of the committee, have known from the beginning that this is our focus. In fact, in my very first meeting with Gina McCarthy since she was nominated on March 20th, I focused on nothing but these 5 requests. You have an outline of the requests. I focused on nothing in that discussion but these 5 requests, and I handed her the requests in writing. And since then, we have constantly focused on these key transparency requests and followed up on them. And just to underscore, these requests are all about openness and transparency and things required by present law. We're not asking the Obama administration to walk away from their views about carbon or anything else. We are asking for openness and transparency, and we are asking that present law be followed in a full and fair and reasonable way. And again, you have the outlines of these requests. Just this morning, you may have noticed the Obama administration sent out a press release promising an executive order about data and other information underlying regulations, which is one of those 5 requests, a critical part of our request. Now, this is already demanded under present law, but I think it's very telling that on the morning of the scheduled markup, the Obama administration is putting out a press release about an executive order underscoring the legitimacy of this request. I want to thank the President because, again, I think it makes the point. This is important. This is basic. This is required. The problem, from our point of view, is this is a press release. And this is the morning of the scheduled markup. We've been talking about this for months in conjunction with this nomination, and in fact, for years more generally. Also, the press reports I've seen so far about this possible executive order talk about future studies, future data. We've been asking about 5 very specific past studies, past data, which are extremely important because they are the underpinnings of the Clean Air Act rules that this administration has done, the most significant rulemaking, arguably, in EPA history. But I do think that press release underscores the legitimacy of what we're talking about. Finally, I want to thank Chairman Boxer. Apparently, she will follow the rules of the committee and the rules of the Senate, just as Chairman Inhofe did in 2003. That is required, but still, I acknowledge that and appreciate that. I would only comment that whenever another markup is scheduled, the rules will be the same. So what will really determine what happens is what EPA does. You know, we've been laying out these basic transparency and openness requests as required under present law for some time. The question about what's going to change is up to EPA because the committee rules and the Senate rules will be the same a week, 2 weeks, a month from now. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions, and I'm also joined by John Barrasso of the committee.
Senator, what do you say to the Democrats saying that, you know, McCarthy has answered 1,000 questions, you're just not satisfied with the answers you're getting?
Well, first of all, it's not 1,000 questions. It's a smaller number. They're talking about questions submitted for the record. They know, Gina McCarthy knows, EPA knows, that our whole focus, every Republican on the committee from the beginning, has been these 5 key transparency and openness requests. They all know that, but they don't want to talk about it. They're pivoting, they're distracting because, quite frankly, their position is pretty indefensible on those 5 transparency and openness requests. But that's the only thing I talked to Gina McCarthy about in our meeting on March 20th. That's what I handed her walking out of that meeting. That's the only thing I've been personally engaged on with EPA in follow-up discussions and meetings, and everybody knows that.
So, Senator, how much does this have to do with the merits of the nominee herself?
Well, it's mostly about EPA openness and transparency policy. That has been a dismal record, in my opinion, for a long time, and there's plenty of evidence of that, including some high-profile issues like the Richard Windsor emails. So it is about that. However, Gina McCarthy is not coming in from the outside. She holds a very significant...
Is this going to poison the work that you have to do with Senator Boxer and the rest of the committee Democrats in terms of working on these big infrastructure bills?
Look, I can only speak for myself. It's certainly not going to, from my point of view.
Okay, and is that because you can put these issues aside and kind of separate out things?
Yeah, I mean, this really is nothing new in the sense that on the committee there's a pretty long tradition of working in a bipartisan way on infrastructure and having some fundamental disagreements about EPA-related things. So essentially, that's nothing new.
And what about the relationship with the eventual Gina McCarthy administrator? I mean, do you think this could tarnish that because you guys have come out so strongly against her confirmation?
Look, what I would say is we need openness and transparency. The American people expect openness and transparency. And I don't really care about a chummy personal relationship if we're constantly getting stonewalled on basic openness and transparency requests. There's a poll that this poster highlights that goes to that. And at least 90% of American voters agree that studies and data used to make federal government decisions should be made public. That's one of the key requests we're talking about. I think it's number 3. And apparently, President Obama is part of this 90% because they put out a press release this morning promising an executive order. The problem is federal law already requires this, and we've been asking for it with regard to these past studies from the start. Let me let Senator Barrasso make any comments he would like, and then we'll continue to answer questions.
Well, thank you. And I think I wanted to be here because we're at a point in our economy where we still have millions of Americans looking for jobs, can't find a job or have a part-time job, looking for full-time work. They can't find that. And I believe that the Obama administration's EPA is actually making it harder for Americans to get work. In fact, during President Obama's first term, EPA policies shut down factories. They discouraged energy exploration. They buried job creators under an incredible amount of red tape, and they deliberately hid information from the public, and that's what we're talking about today. The new nominee to be EPA administrator has been, I believe, extremely unresponsible for the information that we've been requesting. We're not asking to amend any bedrock environmental laws. What we're simply requesting is access to the scientific data and reasoning behind the justification for expensive new rules and the regulations that continue to cost in a time of high unemployment. True whole economy modeling on EPA's war on coal regulations so that we can understand the true cost. I continue to believe that the EPA and this administration, underestimates the cost, overestimates the benefits, and the costs are real and the benefits are unknown. And simply requesting information that McCarthy and this administration honor its commitment to transparency. I mean, that's what they promised. And to stop using delay tactics to keep the true cost of their regulations from the American people. Now, the acting administrator of the EPA today, Bob Perdicepi, is more than capable of managing the agency until a nominee is confirmed. According to the EPA's website, the acting administrator continues a career spanning nearly 4 decades as one of the nation's leading environmental and public policy figures. So he knows what he's doing there, and I think we should be absolutely willing to wait on a confirmation of Gina McCarthy and the specifics that we're requesting today until we get the information that we continue to look for.
Senator Vitter, do you have a timeline moving forward, any endpoint in your mind where you'll just decide to?
That is completely up to EPA. We've made crystal clear what this is all about, these 5 openness and transparency requests for months. And in fact, none of these requests are new. They predate the nomination. So that's completely up to EPA.
With your focus on transparency, do you think you're losing focus on what has been a traditional concern of Republicans, which is EPA's plans to regulate greenhouse gas emissions?
No, let me go back to John's comments. I completely agree with everything he said. But I think it's important that we're not asking or expecting the president or his administration to change their bedrock views. But I believe the way we move forward as a country and bridge these huge divides we have on some policies like this, in the case of EPA policy, is to get back to what the EPA was founded on originally, what I think it's gotten very far away from, which is basing decisions and regulations on true, sound science. And that's why these issues, this information, this data, openness, transparency is so important, because that can get us back to a common point which we should be able to agree on, sound science. But you can't have that discussion when there's no openness and transparency and when that's hidden. And that's why the data request, which is number 3 on our list, is particularly important.
So even if you guys had voted today and McCarthy went through, there's still a hold on her nomination from Senator Blunt. And,
as I understand it, and that means it will require 60 votes on the Senate floor as of now.
So to what extent is this a coordinated campaign to slow down her nomination process?
Well, this is a coordinated campaign to get basic information as required by federal law. That's what the coordinated campaign is about, to follow the law, to let the American people have light of day, sunshine. Pretty ironic that we're not getting this out of EPA. Sunshine, clear skies. Anybody else? Thank you all very much.